Hi, I'm Scott Hanselman. This is another episode of Hansel Minutes. Today I'm chatting with Joe Finney. He's a Microsoft MVP, a product owner. He makes apps, former mechanical engineer. This is a person with a full-time job, but a plan to make his side hustle his full-time job. How are you, Joe?
I'm doing great.
So you describe yourself to me as an indie app maker, and we love indie games. We love independent this, independent that. Indie is the word, and it's the great word. Now you have a full-time job. You have a W-2, good old-fashioned American, go to work, go home, doing a thing, but you code at night too?
Yeah.
Why would you do such a thing, Joe?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I was a mechanical engineer for 10 years, and the whole time I was just kind of obsessed with software. So I just kept thinking about it, and I was obsessed with like the CAD programs I would use and the engineering programs I would use. And I just kept thinking, this should be over here and that should do this and this should do this. And I was like the Excel wizard at work. So everyone was, they've come to me when they're like, hey, can I do this? And I'm like, you're describing a database. Yeah, let's do it in Excel. And then there was a problem that was too big for Excel. And I made a little piece of software. It was actually for like a vacation lottery, weighted to balance kind of seniority plus getting the request in on time. So it's kind of a lot of different complicated things. And then saying, okay, who's going to get the day off so the factory can stay running? And after I made that, I was like, okay, this is really cool. And I really, really like this. And there's a lot more resources out there that I could just Google and figure it out. So that was kind of the hook. And then from there, I made a little Windows Phone app. And then I was like, I had a touchscreen laptop at the time. And I was like, man, I should be able to like interact with my calendar the way that I do with my paper calendar on my wall in my cubicle. So that's where I had the idea for an ink calendar. And I made that. And it was a UWP app. And slowly over the next, I think it was like 7 years now, I've been kind of building these apps and figuring out what I'm going to do. But they all kind of come from that. There's a problem that I'm thinking about, and I just want to fix it, try a little nugget of something, and then evolve it. And over the past couple of years, I'm like, okay, let's get more serious about this. Software can be a living. Let's try to make it happen.
When you do these kind of small to middle-sized apps, is it something you're doing entirely by yourself? Do you have a designer? Do you ever go and go onto Fiverr and hire people to help out? Or is it really like the size of the app and its scope is limited to what one person can do? It's a one pizza team.
It's a half a pizza team. It's just me. I've thought about it. I think there's a couple of challenges with like hiring people out. Obviously, finding the right person, like that's kind of the hardest part always, is like the amount of time it takes. And that's the number one thing about me and the work that I do is it's all about time. And if I'm going to spend time looking for someone, I could spend months and months looking for the right person who has the right skill set, and nothing got done in that amount of time. And I could have just done it myself. So is the design going to suffer a little bit? Yeah. Is the, design, architecture and the coding going to suffer? Yeah. Is it going to be good enough? I think so, hopefully.
What about what I call the psychic weight of the apps? You've got an outdoor fitness app that's on, Google Play and App Store, so that's a cross-platform app. You've got apps in the Microsoft Store. Some of them are user-friendly apps that are really polished, like Ink Calendar. Some are, quick and dirty utilities like TextGrab that call Win32 APIs. But they all are out there and they exist. They are always getting users every day, and they're maybe getting bugs every day from users that might not be very respectful of the dollar or the free that they spent, to get that app. Doesn't that weigh on you?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely a weird thing. I mean, I think it's an interesting relationship, like the economics and the energy and the amount of time that indies in particular spend and like the pressure they put on themselves to deliver something amazing. It's high and it can be a lot, but this is going to be a roundabout way of answering the question. But whenever big like tech outages happen, like we had one recently, or I use software that Microsoft puts out or Apple puts out or Adobe, and they have bugs in them and they have, issues. And I think it's going to be okay. As long as the bug doesn't totally wreck something, as long as you're not going to lose data. That's the biggest concern, really, in my mind, is that somebody, especially in calendars, that they would be working for a long time, having these journals, and then it all goes away somehow.
So you're prioritizing losing data bugs.
Absolutely. Yeah. But also, I just have to remind myself that I'm not a huge tech company. And so another part of that is kind of putting that messaging in the app. Instead of saying like the team is evaluating this, I say I am. It's just me. Yeah. So I think that can kind of hurt when people are like, oh, I need a big company behind this. But I'm like, it really is just me. And I'm not trying to like pretend that there's, a big company behind this. Mm-hmm. But also just using a lot of my apps over and over and over. Like I use all of the apps that I make. And I think that really helps. But it is definitely stressful to think about that bad experience.
I get reviews on the podcast, and I would say that they don't necessarily always feel good, but like I'm looking, for example, on Ink Calendar, which is a highly rated, almost 4.0, 3.9, 4-star app here. But I look at the lowest reviews. You know what they all are? Oh, it wouldn't download. Oh, Microsoft Store wouldn't update it. They have nothing to do with Ink Calendar. That's got to feel weird.
Yep, it is frustrating, and it's interesting because that app is very much a store discovery app, and an app like Text Grab, which is related to Text Extractor, the PowerToy. I made that PowerToy for the team there, and that is discovered on GitHub more often. And so when people get bugs on Text Grab, they're saying, hey, I found this bug. I think it's on line 59. They are reporting the bug, and there's no review system on GitHub. So I think it's interesting how when there's a mechanism for that feedback to kind of like get handled and addressed, people feel heard and they feel like they can engage a little bit more. But on an app store, all the app stores are just like 1 to 5 stars. Say what you want to say. And that's it. Like it doesn't open a ticket, it's not a ticketing system. It's kind of different there. It doesn't open a support case. And right. So people just take that as an opportunity to just rail on you sometimes. And that is just killer. And I try to reply and say, hey, I'm sorry, you're having a problem. It's just, again, even in the reviews, I'm trying to communicate that it's me, I'm sorry you had this. Send an email. I will look into it. Yeah. Because it really is just me. And a lot of times people are like reasonable. Almost always people are reasonable. And I say, please email support and I'll try to help you out.
Yeah. It seems like your apps that are clearly developer apps or like prosumer apps, not consumer, but like professionals, like if it didn't work, like one of the things on Text Extractor was like, doesn't work with Arabic. They give you a 3-star review. You said, I'll fix it in the next one. They'll come back. They'll update it to a 5-star review because a developer is telling another developer, I see you. But then the Ink one is more of a consumer app that regular humans are using. And they're like, it either is amazing or it's not amazing. Like it's like 1 star or 5 stars. There's no 4 stars. There's no 4.5 stars. They just want you to know it didn't update or it didn't. And then they'll go and blame things about like Microsoft Defender did this thing. It's got nothing to do with you. I wonder if devs are nicer or less nice when it comes to reviews.
I think so. And I think it really is, to your point, like you kind of have to get it. Like you're not just out there. A lot of devs do get it and they understand kind of how hard it can be and how tricky it can be to solve some of these bugs. And consumers just think, they open Office and they work in Office and they close that and they open, in Calendar and they're like, they're equivalent. And so they, have the same kind of standards, the same reaction, even though they're very different and they're built by very different groups of people. But it's actually an interesting pattern in apps. I don't know if you've noticed it when they'll ask you, hey, are you liking the app? And if you say yes, they'll say, rate it. And if you say no, they'll say, send us an email.
Yeah, exactly. Don't rate it no matter what you do. Say nothing to the thing.
Because they're trying to move you to the ticket, right? They're like, and ultimately, I think that is part of why, again, I'm like trying to put the human back in the loop. And I'm like, I can help you with this. Like, let's have a dialogue here. And the App Store review just is not a place for dialogue, it definitely makes it a challenge to address anything.
So you've got a bunch of apps though, and you've got a bunch of apps, times updates, times reviews. They're all priced between $10 and $1.99. So it certainly, they email you and they take an hour of your time. That's cutting into any, coffee money that you're making. How do you maintain your like mental health and general vibe? Because I see not just, you're an indie app developer, but I see open source people burn out. We see YouTubers burn out. How do you prevent burning out if you're just a one-man shop?
I think something that really helps is having a network totally devoid or disconnected from tech and just friends who don't know anything about it. And you can just like complain about it, and that helps. And then also running, having hobbies that have nothing to do with it, but also having a few different apps. So instead of having all of my eggs in one basket and I just have to hammer on a problem over and over and over until I get it done, I can kind of bounce around. So I do frequently kind of get, I wouldn't call it burned out, but I get, at the end of my my energy. So whenever I talk to people about indie apps, I frequently frame it in a term of like energy, which sounds a little like mystical. But anybody who works on projects that don't have a deadline or a hard start stop kind of understand what that means. It's like, if I don't have energy for it, I'm not going to work on it. And so if I have 5 apps, I can kind of like follow the energy here. So I'm like, I want to follow the energy on my React Native app. Okay, now I want to follow the energy over here. And like the issues and the stuff builds up, and builds up in the energy. And you're like, okay, I know what I'm going to work on, and I'm going to get excited about it. Because if I'm not excited about it, if I hate it, then why am I trying to make this my job?
That is very healthy. Are you familiar with the concept of spoon theory?
Barely.
Right. So it's just another way of saying, like, do you have the energy? But it's kind of a fun thing to say. It's a metaphor that describes the amount of energy that you have, mental energy, physical energy, is how many spoons were you given in the morning? So it's like, okay, I got 6 spoons. Am I doing a thing that is going to take spoons, whether it be, and you can use the metaphor, like, am I emptying the ocean with a teaspoon? Am I taking a spoon and I got to go and eat a whole pile of crap at work? So then, my kids will come home and they're just like, I got no spoons today, man. So then you go and do the other thing that'll get you those spoons back so that you can go and shovel the tomorrow. And you might feel like this is an ink calendar day, or another day might be, this is a text grab day. I got the spoons for that app, but not this other app.
Yep, for sure. It definitely is a lot about the managing your own energy, because I'm doing a kind of a major rewrite of the appointments and how appointments are managed through Ink Calendar. And it is slow, it is arduous, and I am not a professional developer. So I'm making a lot of mistakes and it's going slower than it should. And it really helps to have other things so I can feel like I'm productive, because a lot of times you don't really see the output. And I don't know who said it, but I heard someone on the internet say, if you're feeling burned out, it's because you're not really seeing the output of what you're doing. You don't see the impact. Like,
it doesn't seem valuable, like nothing's happened. I've done nothing, nothing's been produced.
Right. Yeah. And that's actually where the reviews kind of help, and connecting with people and sharing with people and getting out there. And simple QR code maker, which is a free QR code app that I actually made because of my job. We had to make QR codes and I couldn't find one that I trusted that was good in open source. And I was like, well, let me do it. And people love it. And it just feels really exciting when you read a review that says, this is simple. Why aren't more apps like this? Great job. I don't know. It really brings a lot of energy to the work.
Hey friends, for the next couple of episodes, while I learn more about AI, in the middle of the show, I'm going to chat with Leendert van Doorn from Qualcomm and look at some of the great work that they're doing over there. I've got a Snapdragon-based Copilot PC right now, and the battery life is it's the battery life that they always promised me. How is that possible? What changes were made to make the battery life so good?
Yeah. So first of all, you're absolutely right? If I look at the Dell XPS, I think it's 19 hours. HP's OmniBook, I think, has 26 hours. It's absolutely amazing. Basically, it's the all-day compute that we've all been going for. The way we're getting there is, first of all, a very efficient CPU, right? So we have a CPU that gives you phenomenal power, right? So it makes it a very snappy platform, but it also does that at very, very efficiently. The other part of it too, we have lots of dedicated accelerators, including the NPU, which is a dedicated AI accelerator. It just runs the AI inference algorithms, and it does that better and more power efficient than anybody else. Right? So it's a combination of these two things. It's a very efficient CPU and then a heterogeneous accelerator strategy, which includes an AI, machine learning accelerator. That is absolutely.
Wow, that's so cool. It's really happening. The move to a new instruction set architecture is seeing some really extraordinary improvements. I'm really enjoying my Copilot PC. Folks can learn a lot more at qualcomm.com/developer if you want to build your software for this great new platform. I want to shift gears a little bit, and I want to call out that you have apps on the Windows Store, the Microsoft Store, the Apple Store, and the Google Play Store. And I can only assume, I have heard, I've done this once or twice, but I don't have a lot of my apps are on GitHub, and people just download and like run click once. But I've heard that the packaging up and the getting an app in the store can be more challenging than even writing the app.
It absolutely is. It's kind of crazy how complicated like building an app is. And then for someone who's like never done this before, they're like, wow, I did all this work. Here, now I just put it in the store. And you're like,
just make a zip file and upload it, right? It's super easy.
Yeah. So actually the technology I use for Outfit is called, it's React Native, but it's a service called Expo. I don't know if you've heard of Expo.
No.
It is amazing because it fixes the problem that you just described. So they kind of are an abstraction layer on top of React Native, and they abstract away a lot of the complexity. And one of the big parts of complexity that they abstract is building and submitting to the store, which is amazing. Like, I have a hard time recommending or trying out anything else because I can literally go into my CLI and type EAS build all, and it will sign me in. It'll pop up web browsers. I put in my 2-factor codes, runs the build, and then I say EAS submit all, and it submits them to the store.
So they have taken the ceremony of that and gotten rid of it.
Yeah, it's a dream. Now on some of my Windows apps, that is literally like every single different technology. So I have like a UWP app that's packaged, and I have to like build those packages on my device. So that's free. So Expo, I'm using some paid plan. So I do have to pay for it. And I wish I could, use my desktop that's just sitting here, but you can't build Apple apps without a Mac. So that's a challenge, but Expo gets around it. But on Windows, I'm bundling up and packaging these apps, and there's all these, the tool chain is so complicated. It fails in the middle, and then you upload it, and then there's a failure when you upload it, or there's an issue with certification. It can get complicated.
So Expo and EAS underneath Expo are, they don't overly point out that they're React, but like the goal is they are React. You create universal apps with React. Could Expo be a thing that could be extended to support just apps in general? Could it be not specific to React, or is it like, why is the deployment tech and the bundling tech, why do they have to be married?
That's a great question. I don't know. And I actually think Flutter, from what I've heard, I've never got into Flutter, but from what I've heard, actually the tool chain for building the apps and deploying them is actually similar in that they do a really good job of, you just run a command that says like, build all of my variants and then submit them to the stores. Pop up the web browsers you need to. I will log in. Let's just make it happen. And I love that. I mean, again, I think I said it earlier that as an indie, the number one resource I have is my time. So if I spend my time fiddling around with these build pipelines, it just is it kills your energy and it sucks your time. It is a lose-lose.
Okay. So we really need someone to listen to this from Windows, and we need Expo to work on Windows, or we need an Expo for Windows, because you're saying all the ceremony, all the boring stuff, all the toil, all the tedium. Now, some of the tediums when I've done, iOS apps has been like making the 57,000 PNGs that they want in various shapes. I assume it doesn't solve that for you.
It helps.
Icons of all shapes and sizes.
It does help.
Yeah.
I don't have to generate all those.
Okay. You make an SVG and it finds the ones of different sizes.
They have a little icon template that you can bring into Figma and then kind of like generate one icon, and then you just tell it to build. And I think that might be part of See,
Wow.
this is a part of it. I don't even know how they're doing
You
it,
don't even know because it just works.
but it doesn't even matter. Yeah, it
And are you
shouldn't
doing
matter.
these builds on your laptop, or is this in GitHub Actions?
It's in their EAS, so it's in the
Okay.
Expo
So
application.
Expo is open source, and EAS is the paid for thing.
Yep, EAS is how they make the money. So they host the machines.
Yeah.
I host the code in GitHub. They connect
Gotcha.
to GitHub. They pull the code, and then run the build.
Expo application services. Yeah. Create a universal Android, iOS, and web application. It does feel like there's, someone who's on Expo, someone who works for Expo who's listening to this podcast. Call me, and when you have a Windows version or want to do a Windows version, we'll have you on the show and hear about it.
So I'll say there is at least one person I know at Microsoft who is working on this problem.
Oh yeah,
for Windows, but it is.
Don't call him out if it's a secret, but text me and tell me.
No, I can. There's an open source project.
You heard
I think
it
it's
here
called
first.
Store CLI.
Yeah, that's great.
So they're working on it, but
I see MS Store CLI.
Yep, that's the one.
Yep,
so
there was a commit just 5 days ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so someone is working on it, but this is a thing of this is a end-to-end problem, and you can do everything you want. You can try to build and do everything locally and then submit it over APIs. But there's a whole other handshaking of authentication and communicating. And is the API even there? Like, how do we bundle with different architectures correctly? Like, how are we even setting up our projects correctly to do that work? And when I use the MS Store CLI, I get crazy errors with some of my apps. And I'm just like, I have no idea what this is.
I want to make sure you're clear with the MS Store CLI that you just mentioned, or are you talking about with store packaging in general? With
the package that I just mentioned. I've tried to use it and it has not worked for me. So, But again, this is a question of, I don't know whose fault this is. Like, is it the author? It
could be just that it's really complicated.
I think it's just really, really complicated. Like I've been around, long enough to not oversimplify problems that I don't know enough about. And I don't know enough about this one. It seems really complicated to me.
Yeah. And now, of course, with ARM, I just got an ARM PC. And that's another thing, right? I want to type win-get at the command line, and I want to just get the thing, and I want to get it from the store, and I want it to just work. Stores in general hide so much complexity from us about versioning and processors and memory and updates. So people wonder, like, why are they paying Apple or why are they paying whoever for the store, for the privilege? Well, let's talk about the CDN. If you woke up and became viral tomorrow and had 1 million new users, you don't have to worry about that. It's not going to cost you a penny.
I tell people this.
Yeah.
And that because I tell them, like, oh yeah, if I sell an app for $1, I would only get like 70 cents from Apple. And they're like, what? That's crazy. And I'm like, no. You think it's crazy? Try hosting your own website. Try managing the entire thing that they do.
Yeah.
Like, it is expensive. It is hard. It is complicated. And again, like this whole pipeline, building, submitting, it's not really what you're trying to do. Like, at the end of the day, I found a problem. I want to build a solution through software. That's what I want to do. I want to make that part better. And like, I don't care about anything else.
So you mentioned to me that you're married, right?
Yep.
But you have a full-time job and then you have this side job, and you're still married.
That's true. That's true.
How do you balance that? Do you ever have like an entire week where you just don't do this stuff on the side and you're okay with it?
Yes. It's rare, but it does happen. Frequently our like media time, when we, at the end of the day, sit on the couch, put a show on, I will have my laptop and I'll be coding at the same time. If the show is really good, sometimes, coding doesn't happen,
Yeah.
But that's typically the ritual. And recently this summer, July was like just a crazy month. And I just had to look at all my GitHub issues that are not going to get resolved and say, not today. But I was definitely missing it. So when that busy period ended, I was excited to get back to it and kind of make some progress.
Very, very cool. So the selection of the technology, though, you said you've got React, you've got different apps. How many different technologies have you picked as an indie? Because sometimes indies will pick one, and that's their thing. But you also seem to be using it as an excuse to learn new tech.
It's a good question. So I learned on .NET originally, and that's where I just feel comfortable. I think that's just really natural to me is C# and XAML. I love it. So that is where I'm going to go first. But obviously, we all have these phones in our pockets, and .NET and XAML, that story is complicated. And particularly the building the bundles and submitting them to the store story is very complicated. And I have a friend who is like, hey, you should check out Expo. It's pretty straightforward and I can help you with your problems. So I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot.
Yeah.
And it's been pretty good. I'm not a huge fan of writing in JavaScript and TypeScript. And I have to kind of get my head around it every time. But then on the Windows side, I feel like that's where I'm just at home. I'm in my living room with the languages and the APIs that I'm used to. But still, I have a WinForms app, a WinApp SDK app, multiple. I have a UWP app and I have a WPF app. Because at some point, this is another thing I like to tell people is I feel like making apps is a little bit like candy making. So apparently in candy making, there's a saying that there has to be one hard step. Because if there's not, people are just going to rip you off and copy you. And so I think in all of my apps, there's at least one hard step, but I don't want to fight the framework. And so if I tried to do text grab in WinApp SDK or in UWP, I would be fighting the framework. It would be so challenging. So it's actually easier for me to kind of learn a new framework and kind of learn a different way of doing things because it's way harder to actually overcome a full screen, borderless, transparent window. So those are the weird little things where it's like, know what roadblocks you're not going to break through and avoid them. And it's really, again, it's about effort and it's about time. And ultimately at the end of the day, these technologies have been around for a while. So if you Google how to do this in WPF, you just get so many answers. So maybe 20 years ago, that wouldn't be the case. It'd be super hard to make these apps as fast as we can, but it's just so easy with all the resources that are out there and all the Stack Overflow answering your exact question. So the jumping between frameworks isn't as much of a challenge as it maybe has been in the past.
Yeah. So everything is possible. So before it was is this possible? Can I call this sound API in JavaScript? And now it's like, oh yeah, you can. Totally can. It just depends on how hard you want to work. And you are learning a lot while you're doing this.
Mm-hmm. It's a learning opportunity, but it's also a matter of just checking to see what's going on elsewhere. So part of it is you don't want to spend so much time and be so invested that somebody elsewhere is solving a problem that you've had and you didn't even check. You didn't even see what was going on elsewhere. So while I really love Expo, my time in React Native and actually writing the app, I'm like, it's not for me. So it's fun, it's pleasant, but I have no interest in moving everything over that way. The web is great, but it's just, I don't know. I don't know what it is. There's just the animal spirits of how it feels to be building that type of software. And I just love building these desktop apps.
You want to get these apps used by as many people as possible, but the PowerToys app, which is free and you can get on Windows, which I think is the first thing I install. I put Windows on my machine and I get PowerToys, and it just basically turns Windows up to 11. Mm-hmm. And Clint Rutkus and the friends over at PowerToys have, in the last 5-10 years, started calling people up that had cool utilities and said, hey, why don't you just become a PowerToy? So then your app might go from a couple of thousand installs to several, 100 million. How did Text Extractor end up in PowerToys? And did they give you a giant bag of money, or did they just give you a high five?
No giant bag of money, unfortunately. But so how it happened is, I think at some point, people who put things out in the world, we're all trying to look at, what are problems and what are easy. And, everyone's like, oh, I got a really easy idea. Everybody always tells me ideas that they have. And at some point you have to think, if this is so clever, is it just going to become the air we breathe? Is it just going to become generic right away? Everyone's going to have one. Am I in a moment, or do I have something special? So like you mentioned, it's open source. Anybody can contribute utilities. And there was an issue that somebody opened and they were like, hey, I saw this video on Twitter that somebody took a screenshot and piped it into a Tesseract. We should build something like that. And I was watching that thread and I was like, I have made this. And somebody mentioned my text grab and they were like, hey, this is open source. Why don't you just use this? And I was like, okay, at that point I have to make a decision. I can either let someone else do this or I can kind of own it myself. And if I own it, I can keep it scoped. I can keep it to be a specific thing. And so text grab it has 4 different modes. It does a lot more stuff. It's a lot more flexible and weird in ways that PowerToys one is not. But this way I can, get the exposure, connect with the team. And I've been still connected really good with the team over there. They're all really great. But I still have text grab, and a ton of people come to text grab from text extractor and they say, oh yeah, it was good, but I wanted this feature and that feature and I saw you built it over there. Because really text extractor is a way for the team to understand the use case. They understood it. They kind of, got some data. They figured out how people do it. And then they built a lot of that functionality directly into a snipping tool. And I'm like, it's inevitable that these things happen, but at least I got to play a part here. And, I got to make some good connections. And I think I became an MVP because of it. And that, opens doors. So at the end of the day, it's about making connections and opening doors. And so I knew that it was going to be a risk, and I did not get, life-changing amounts of money.
Yeah. Well, it's an open source project. There's a ton of things inside of PowerToys that are open source things. It's almost like a packaging bundle, like the Humble Bundle. It's let's throw it in there, and that'll make everyone's life easier. And then I like the idea that you kind of forked it, so you do have your own thing. You can run in your own direction, and Text Extractor is its own thing with its own unique feature set. So you get the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much, Joeseph Finney, for chatting with me today.
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity.
You can check out Joe's apps at JoeFinApps, JoeFinApps.com. Download Outdoor Fitness, download Ink Calendar, Text Grab, and lots of other great things. I'm a big fan myself of MiniLook, which is just a tiny little email client for your Outlook. It's a fantastic little thing for firing off quick little emails. This has been another episode of Hansel Minutes, and we'll see you again next week.